The rain poured steadily, tapping against the old warehouse like a persistent drummer. The wind rushed through the broken windows, bringing with it the musty smell of wet ground and old machinery. Water gathered in the cracks of the pavement, trembling under the steady downpour. With my shoulders hunched and hands buried deep in my jacket pockets, I trudged through the puddles, feeling the cold seep in. Just another long shift at the shop. Just another night. And then I heard it, a sound, faint and fragile, almost drowned out by the rain. A weak cry, trembling and urgent. I paused and listened. The sound came again, a little higher this time, filled with desperation. It was coming from the shadows near a stack of shipping containers, mostly hidden from view. Then I heard it again and again. Not just one, several, kittens, all alone, all abandoned. Something shifted inside me. I hesitated only briefly before moving forward, the cold rain running down my neck and my breath clouding in the chilly air. The cries grew sharper, tiny sobs that broke the stillness around me. As I got closer, I noticed a flicker of movement beneath a warped metal sheet leaning against the warehouse. Something small, curled up in the dark. I crouched down, reaching to lift the metal. The moment I did, tiny bodies scrambled back, filling the air with their startled sounds. My heart raced as I spotted them. 3 kittens. One was a frail, soot-colored ball of fur, pressing itself against the concrete, its little ribs moving rapidly. Another was a ginger-striped tabby, hissing in fear, his tiny body puffed up as if trying to appear larger. The third, the smallest, was curled against a torn piece of cloth, kneading the empty space beside him. His tiny mouth opened again in that heartbreaking wail. He was searching for his mother. But the alley remained silent. No mother appeared. The rain had drenched them, their fur matted against their bony frames. Their eyes, wide and unblinking, shone with something that tightened my throat. Hunger, fear, loss. I took a slow breath. I didn't see myself as a rescuer or a hero. Yet something inside me pushed against the urge to walk away. So despite every instinct that told me to mind my own business, I reached out my hand. As my hand moved closer, the tabby, who I later learned was named Milo, swatted at me defensively. His small claws waved in the air, just barely missing me. The unspoken message was clear. Stay away. Despite the rain soaking his fur, there was a tense energy as he let out a weak, trembling hiss. His brother Jasper seemed too tired to react, his cries becoming softer, his throat sore from calling out for a mother who didn't arrive. The third kitten, Luna, stayed perfectly still. My heart sank. They were frightened, and justifiably so. I spoke softly, trying to calm them. "It's okay, little one. I'm not here to hurt you." But how much could words really mean to animals that had faced only cold, hunger, and abandonment? Taking off my jacket, I shook off the rain and carefully lowered it toward them. Milo flinched, his ears pressed back, but he didn't flee. That alone told me he was too exhausted to run. Jasper let out another faint wail, struggling to inch closer to the fabric, as if it could replace the warmth he desperately needed. Luna hardly moved at all. I realized time was short. Behind me stood the warehouse, its metal beams creaking with age. A storm drain nearby gurgled ominously, a reminder of how easily things could vanish in this harsh environment. If I didn't take them with me now, they likely wouldn't survive the night. So, I made my decision. I had to get them out of there. I reached for Jasper first. His tiny body felt almost weightless in my hands. He made a tired mule but didn't resist. He was too cold, too frail. I tucked him inside my jacket, feeling the gentle rise and fall of his little ribs against my chest. Milo was a different story. He was the fighter. His claws dug into the concrete as I approached, his eyes fixed on me with raw fear. "Come on, buddy. I know this is hard, but we're running out of time." He pressed his ears back. I took a slow step closer, but just as I was about to grab him, a deep growl echoed from the shadows. My heart raced. From behind the shipping containers, something moved, a low shape slinking forward, its eyes shining faintly in the dim light. A stray. Larger than the kittens, it was lean and clearly hungry. Its fur hung loosely over sharp ribs, and its tail flicked restlessly. This wasn't their mother. This was a rogue, a survivor. I had seen cats like this before. These were animals hardened by life on the streets, shaped by hunger and countless struggles. And they had heard the kittens' cries too. In this world, not every cat was a comfort. I stepped back carefully, my heart racing. Was this cat here to guard its territory, or was it a threat? Jasper pressed close against me, trembling. Milo stood completely still, and Luna remained unresponsive. Then suddenly, the stray cat charged. It came at me, a chaotic blur of damp fur and sharp edges, its claws scraping the wet pavement. I instinctively recoiled, my heartbeat quickening as I realized this cat wasn't just curious. It was frantic and unpredictable. It had honed its instincts on the tough streets, learning to seize whatever opportunities it could, no matter the risks. Milo hissed, his small frame tense with fear. Despite his bravery, he was no match for the rogue cat. Jasper whimpered softly, while Luna showed no reaction at all. I tightened my arms around them, trying to shield their small, shaking bodies beneath my jacket. The rogue's yellow eyes fixed on me, unwavering, as it approached with muscles coiled and ready. It was no longer merely observing. I could sense it was preparing to act. Feeling uncertain, I wished I had the skills of Clara, who seemed to understand a cat's movements instinctively, or Reggie, who had cared for strays in this alley for longer than I had known them. I didn't know how to calm the situation, or whether I should remain where I was or retreat. All I could think about was the kittens. They were too weak to flee and too small to fight. If I made a single wrong move, I could lose them before I even had a chance to help. I fumbled in my pocket, desperate for something that could help. My fingers grasped a small, crumbling object, a forgotten protein bar, still wrapped. With careful movements, I tore open the wrapper. The sound caught the rogue's attention, its ears perking up as the scent of oats and peanut butter drifted through the cool air. It paused, caught between hunger and wariness. I had only moments, perhaps even less. Slowly shifting my weight, I tossed the bar to the far end of the alley, and it landed with a dull thunk on the pavement. The rogue cat's head snapped toward the noise, momentarily frozen, its claws flexing against the wet concrete as it weighed its options. Then it finally changed direction. As it moved towards the food, I didn't hesitate. I quickly picked up Milo and gathered Luna in my arms, making a run for it. My boots splashed through the flooded alley, the cold water seeping through my clothes, but I held on to them tightly. The wind rushed past, drowning out everything except the loud thudding of my own heart. I had no clear idea of where I was headed, just a strong instinct to get them to safety. Time was of the essence. As I dashed through the alley, the weight of the kittens pressed against me. Rain blurred my vision, and cold water streamed down my face, but I kept going. I could still hear the stray behind me, its desperate bites on a protein bar echoing through the night. The sound gave me a slight lead, but I knew I couldn't relax. If that cat decided to chase after us, I wasn't sure I could stop it a second time. I turned a corner and almost lost my footing. My boots slipped on the slick pavement. My breath came in short gasps, my heart racing. The streets ahead were empty, illuminated only by the dull glow of streetlights and the endless stretch of wet asphalt. I needed to think clearly. I couldn't take them home. My flat was cramped, hardly enough space for me, let alone 2 kittens. I had no food or blankets for them. Even if I wanted to help, I wasn't prepared. And there was something else to consider. Clara had advised me before, don't intervene unless you're ready. Rescuing strays isn't just about picking them up and hoping for the best. It involves medical care, rehabilitation, and knowing how to manage their illnesses and fears. Kittens this young rarely make it on their own, and without their mother, their chances were even slimmer. What if they were sick? What if I took them in, only to see them struggle and possibly fade away? I felt Jasper shiver against my chest, and it hit me hard. I needed assistance. I made a sharp turn into a different alley, one I recognized immediately, Reggie's alley. A stack of old crates leaned against the brick wall at the back, creating a small, makeshift feeding station. If anyone could guide me on what to do next, it was him. As I approached, I slowed down, my breath still uneven, but the alley was too quiet. The familiar sounds of rustling cans and tiny paws were gone, replaced by an unsettling silence. Something felt off. Then I noticed the overturned food bowls, their contents spilling onto the ground. The wooden crates bore deep, jagged scratches. It was clear that something significant had happened here. And where was Reggie? As I stood in the alley, rain soaking my hair and my arms sore from cradling the kittens, the quiet pressed in on me. It was the type of stillness that made you uneasy, making me acutely aware that a struggle had taken place. I couldn't shake the question. Where was Reggie? Jasper, nestled against my chest, whimpered softly, pulling me back to the present. I didn't have time to think about things beyond my control. 3 tiny, vulnerable kittens depended on me. They were cold, hungry, and barely hanging on. My instinct was to get them out of the rain, but a bigger question loomed. What should I do with them? Taking them home seemed impossible. My apartment was cramped, chilly, and totally unprepared for them. I had no litter, no food, just the thin jacket I wrapped around them. On top of everything, I had no experience. Could I even care for them properly? Would they survive the night? Then there was Clara. She had spent years caring for animals, learning how to help and make difficult decisions. If anyone could guide me, it would be her. But would she be willing to help? She had cautioned me before. This wasn't just about picking up stray animals and hoping for the best. There were rules and protocols to follow, and without proper care, these kittens had slim chances of survival. If I brought them to her, she might deliver the hard truth that I wasn't equipped to save them. That the kindest option might be to take them to a shelter or something worse. Milo squirmed in my arms, his tiny body fighting against his exhaustion. He was a little survivor, refusing to give up. I clenched my jaw, feeling the weight of my decision. Should I take them to Clara and risk hearing what I feared? Or should I attempt to handle this alone, knowing I might fail? The kittens stared up at me, their wide eyes filled with anticipation. I had to make a choice. The rain transformed into a steady drizzle, creating a glistening layer over the streets that reflected the soft glow of the flickering streetlights. The air was filled with the scent of wet concrete and rust, a chilly dampness that seeped into my clothes. I adjusted my hold on the kittens nestled under my jacket, noticing how their tiny bodies trembled. The adrenaline that had propelled me forward was fading, leaving behind a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. Every muscle ached, but I pushed myself onward. Clara was my best, perhaps my only option. She would know how to handle this. Even if she was upset or told me I shouldn't be rescuing kittens without a plan, she was the one I trusted most. As I stepped onto the main road, the quiet of the alley fell behind me. The dimly lit streets felt almost lonely. Water dripped from my hair, trickling down my neck and soaking into the damp collar of my jacket. My boots made soft splashes as I walked through puddles. The only sounds punctuating the night were my footsteps and the distant rumble of passing cars. Just a few more blocks and I would reach Clara's door. I kept moving, trying to shake the unease that was gnawing at me. Then I heard it. A sound that didn't belong. The wind, rain, the usual city noises were all present, but something about this was different. It was a scrape, a shuffle, something purposeful. I slowed my pace and glanced over my shoulder. My breath caught in my throat. A shadow shifted between the crates, lurking just outside the glow of the streetlight. For a moment, I thought it might be that stray cat from earlier, still searching for food. But then I realized the shape was wrong. Too tall and too still. A knot formed in my stomach as it hit me. Someone was in the alley watching me. They didn't move or make a sound, they just waited in the darkness. I felt my heart race and tightened my grip on the kittens. The rain obscured their features, but I could sense their gaze on me. This wasn't an innocent bystander. Someone had been there long enough to see everything unfold. I forced myself to keep walking, each step deliberate as I fought against the instinct to flee. The kittens shifted slightly beneath my jacket, their small bodies giving off what warmth they had, but I hardly noticed. My attention was fixed on the presence behind me, the figure that remained still, silent, simply observing from the shadows. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just someone seeking refuge from the rain, perhaps as lost as I felt on this cold, empty night. Yet, the stiffness in my shoulders and the way my heart raced told a different story. As I reached the end of the alley and stepped onto the main road, I blended into the flickering streetlights. My steps were steady, though my breathing was shallow. I had one clear goal. I needed to get to Clara. Everything else, the uneasy knot in my stomach, the chill of the rain, the unsettling sensation of being watched, had to wait. I couldn't let fear drive me into making a reckless move, especially with the kitten's safety at stake. The city lay ahead, quiet in the late hour, with only the sound of an occasional car rolling on the wet streets. The headlights shimmered off the puddles like gold, but instead of comfort, I felt a tightening in my chest. As I passed a store with glass windows, I glanced at my reflection, my drenched silhouette fleeting. A sense of unease washed over me. Behind me, just on the edge of the sidewalk, was a shadow moving too close to be a coincidence. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself while clutching the kittens. If I sped up, they would pick up their pace too. If I broke into a run, they might chase. I had to stay smart. The safest path led to Clara's place, just a few blocks away. I needed to reach her without attracting attention, without letting whoever this was corner me in some other alley. I willed myself to keep my pace steady, even as my heart raced with every footstep. I wasn't just holding 3 kittens anymore, I was carrying a growing dread, and the figure lingering behind me wasn't going anywhere. The nearer I got to Clara's, the more pronounced the weight of the footsteps became. They weren't loud or rushed, but they were there, steady and measured, keeping just close enough to remind me I wasn't alone. It felt deliberate, as if the person wanted to make sure I was aware of their presence. The kittens stirred under my jacket, their small warmth my only comfort. I needed to focus. If I turned too soon or let them know I was aware, they might act. If I just walked directly to Clara's without thinking, I would be leading those people right to her. I wasn't only responsible for myself anymore, I had the kittens to protect, and now Clara could be at risk too. The street ahead was wet, glistening under the dim glow of the streetlights. Clara's place lay 3 blocks away, which was a mix of relief and concern. Reaching her door would mean safety, but 3 blocks felt far when I was exposed. I needed to figure out who was following me before I made my move. Ahead, I spotted a bus stop with a glass shelter slick from the rain, just what I needed. Holding the kittens securely, I casually veered toward it, as if I had decided to take a break from my walk. I settled on the bench, careful not to disturb them, leaning forward to appear as if I were just tired from the rain. My heart raced as I waited. The seconds felt endless. The rain softly hit the pavement. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed movement. A figure slowed near the street. He seemed to be a man, tall, wearing a dark jacket with the hood pulled low. He paused for just a moment, perhaps realizing I had stopped. Then he stepped into the light of the street lamp. As he came into view, my stomach sank. I recognized his face. My breath hitched at the sight. It was Reggie. Of all the people I thought could be following me, I hadn't considered him at all. It didn't add up. Reggie was usually in the alley near his usual spot, feeding stray animals like he had for years. He was someone I relied on, someone who should understand why I couldn't just walk away from the kittens. But there he was, standing in the rain, his stance tense, his expression unreadable. Something felt off, different from the familiar, gruff man I knew. I tightened my grip on the kittens, feeling their fragile warmth as I adjusted my position. The unease that had been creeping up on me since I realized I was being followed now gripped me tightly. I swallowed and forced my voice to remain steady. "Reggie, didn't expect to see you out here." My words seemed thin between us, muffled by the rain and the weight of the uncertainty hanging in the air. For what felt like an eternity, he just stared. Rainwater dripped from his face, and despite his soaked coat, he stood tall, his gaze fixed on mine in a way that made me uneasy. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and serious. "You don't really understand what you just got into, kid." The way he said it sent a shiver through me, colder than the rain soaking my clothes. I tightened my grip on my jacket, shifting the kittens I held closer. "What does that mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, even though my heart was racing. It was clear Reggie was not just warning me. He was trying to tell me something significant, something that was still beyond my comprehension. His eyes flicked to my chest, where the kittens were stirring, and I noticed his jaw clench. "You should have left them where you found them." His words felt sharp and carried a bitterness that caught me off guard. Just moments before, I had convinced myself that rescuing them was the right choice. I had pushed through every doubt, every hesitation, convincing myself I was doing the right thing. Now, drenched and shivering, I stood before him, and the one person I believed would support me was questioning my decision. I shook my head in disbelief. "They would have died, Reggie. You know that." My words came out more forcefully than I intended, but I didn't care. The image of those tiny kittens huddled in the rain, their bodies shaking and their cries fading away, replayed in my mind. I believed I had done the only thing I could do, the only thing that felt right. Reggie let out a slow breath, glancing away for a moment as if checking the street. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, but it held the same intensity. Yeah, maybe they would have, but maybe that would have been better. His words felt like a punch to the gut, leaving emptiness inside me. My mind struggled to understand them. There was an underlying message, something unspoken, and I began to realize that what I had thought was just a simple rescue had the potential to be something much more complicated. The rain had lightened to a gentle mist, clinging to my skin, yet I barely noticed. My attention was focused entirely on Reggie, the tense set of his jaw, the tightness in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. He wasn't just angry or warning me, he was worried. I took a careful step forward, adjusting the kittens in my arms. I felt their small, wobbly movements beneath my jacket. "What are you trying to say, Reggie? What's happening?" I asked, keeping my voice soft but steady. For a moment, he didn't say anything. He rubbed his hand across his wet face, letting out a heavy sigh. He looked down the empty street, as if he were waiting for someone to appear. Then, when he finally spoke, his voice was low and cautious. "Those kittens, they weren't just left there, Ethan. Their mother, Misty, she didn't just vanish." He locked eyes with me, his gaze shadowed by an emotion I couldn't quite grasp. She was taken. A cold shiver crept through me, and it had little to do with the rain. I shifted my weight, trying to process his words. "Taken? By who?" Reggie shook his head. "It's not about who, it's about what." My stomach twisted. "Reggie, you're not making any sense." He let out a heavy sigh, sounding worn out. "Do you ever think about why so many stray animals disappear around here? Cats, dogs, even birds sometimes. Have you noticed how many come through this alley? How many I've fed and how many just vanish?" His voice sharpened, but I could hear the frustration and maybe guilt behind it. "Do you really think they just run off? That's how it works?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I had never considered it like that before. Strays came and went. That was how life was, wasn't it? Some got picked up, some didn't survive, but the thought that something or someone was hunting them hadn't crossed my mind. Reggie must have noticed the doubt flicker across my face. He stepped a bit closer. "Listen, kid, you don't realize what you've walked into. If you took those kittens, you're now in the middle of this. And if they find out you've got them," he shook his head, "they'll come after you." My throat dried up. "Who?" Reggie's gaze remained steady. "The ones who took their mother." The air grew heavier between us, thick with something unsaid that made the night feel colder. The rain had softened into a mist, clinging to my skin, but my body felt wired with tension. I could hear my breath quickening, the pulse in my throat pounding like a warning. My grip tightened around the kittens, their warmth the only thing anchoring me in that moment. Reggie was serious, very serious. That realization frightened me more than anything else. He was always the one who stayed calm, who dismissed rumors without a second thought. But in that moment, he looked at me as if I'd already made an irreversible mistake. The thought weighed heavily on my chest, pressing down like a stone. I tried to keep my voice steady, even as my stomach twisted. "Who are they, Reggie? What do they want?" Reggie shook his head, his jaw tight, as if he was deciding how much to share. "I don't have all the answers, but I can tell you this. Those kittens," he pointed to my jacket, his fingers clenching into a fist. "They're not just random strays. Their mother was targeted and taken. If you have them, that means they'll come after you too." His words settled in me, sending chills through my body. It wasn't just about saving the kittens anymore. It was about whether I could protect them and myself. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind, each one trying to find a way out of this situation that didn't involve surrendering them to whatever threat lurked in the shadows. But options felt scarce. Keeping them meant inviting danger into my life. Letting them go risked sending them straight back to whatever had hurt their mother. Reggie must have noticed the conflict in my eyes because he sighed, his shoulders dropping. "If you're going to do this, you need to be smart. You have to be prepared." His voice lowered, urgency spilling from his words. "You need to disappear." The weight of that decision pressed down on me. There was no way back now. I had sparked something the moment I picked them up in that alley, and now I had one path forward. I locked eyes with Reggie, my resolve solid despite the turmoil inside. Then help me. The night held a different weight now, almost tangible, as if the city itself was waiting. The rain had slowed, leaving the streets shining under the faint glow of streetlights, but the chill in the air felt more significant than just the weather. My mind swirled with plans, already searching for what disappearing would entail. If I wanted to keep those kittens safe, that was exactly what I needed to do. Reggie was silent for a long moment, contemplating what to say next. He stood there watching me, perhaps hoping I'd reconsider or give in. But I didn't. I felt I couldn't. Jasper shifted in my arms, letting out a faint mewl, and that sound confirmed my choice. There was no way back now. Reggie let out a sigh, his hand running down his face as if he were already worn out by what lay ahead. "I know a place. It's not ideal, but it'll keep you safe for a while," he said, his voice dropping to a softer tone. He seemed resigned, as if he understood I wasn't going to take the sensible route and turn back. "But if we're doing this, you need to follow my lead. No questions asked. You do exactly what I say when I say it. Do you get me?" I nodded, feeling my throat tighten. It was strange to think about how much had changed so quickly. Just hours earlier, I was a guy finishing a shift at the shop, walking through a familiar alley on my way home. Now, I found myself on an empty street, with 3 tiny lives nestled against my chest, preparing to vanish into the night. It was hard to believe, and yet, it felt like the only thing that truly mattered. Reggie turned and gestured for me to follow, and I did so without a second thought. Maybe I wasn't ready for this situation. Maybe I wasn't the kind of person meant to take on something like this. But none of that seemed important now. I had made my choice. Whatever lay ahead, I was prepared. Though the rain had stopped, many questions lingered. What happened to the mother cat? Who was responsible for her disappearance? And now that I had chosen to protect the kittens, could I actually keep them safe from what was coming? If this story has made you reflect on the importance of stepping up to help, you're not alone. Rescuing isn't just about picking up an animal and bringing it home. It involves responsibility, sacrifice, and sometimes facing unexpected challenges. One thing is clear, my journey is only just beginning. What would you have done in my place? Would you have taken the kittens, knowing the risks involved? Or would you have walked away, leaving behind the unknown? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. We read every one. If you found this story compelling, remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on more incredible rescue tales like this one. Some decisions can have a lasting impact on our lives. For Ethan and the kittens he has taken in, there's no way to go back now.